All right, we're going to get started here right away with information on the land designation that we're working on. But first, I want to start by saying good morning to everybody. Thank you for coming. What we're going to do is Lisa's going to go through basically to talk about the designation, what it is that we're exactly trying to do. And then after that, Natalie Dueck, who's the lands person from Indian Affairs and is also the electoral officer, will kind of go through the designation process, explain that. And then if you guys have any questions, then we'll do that during. If you have questions during, just let us know if you have a question. But afterwards, we'll answer questions too. We tried to make everything as straightforward as we possibly could. But like I said, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. So we're going to start with Lisa. She's going to go through just the technical side of it. And questions, please let us know.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Horvath with the TTH Law Firm. I'm the legal counsel for the vote. We're here today to discuss and summarize the purpose of the designation and the voting procedure for January 19th, 2019. So first of all, I'll kind of answer some of the common questions for what a designation is. So essentially, once land attains reserve status, it legally vests in Her Majesty and is set aside in trust for the use and benefit of the Piapot Band. However, before reserve land can be leased to a third party, it must be designated to Her Majesty. A third party includes all corporations, partnerships, joint ventures, including any that are wholly owned by the band. Essentially, a designation vote is a process through which a band may authorize Her Majesty to grant a lease or other interest in reserve land with the consent of the band council to any third party or to a wholly owned band entity. So the question becomes, why designate the lands now? This will allow attract investment by allowing Her Majesty to grant an interest in reserve lands. This would allow a lease tenant to obtain financing. There's more economic certainty for a lease tenant versus a Bakshi lease. The lease tenant's interest would be registered at the Indian Land Registry. And additionally, if the land is designated, Her Majesty would be permitted to grant easements, rights of way, licenses, and other rights, including agreements with lenders or sublessees, with the consent of the band, of course. So which lands are being designated in this designation and the purpose of each designation? So there are 4 separate designations, and I'll provide a brief review of them all. So under ballot 1, the first designation, the Chief and Council are proposing the construction of a gas station and convenience store in the city of Prince Albert under a similar arrangement as the Cree Line Mini Mart in Regina. By voting yes under ballot 1, this would allow a band-owned entity to enter into a surface lease with Her Majesty for a gas station and convenience store in PA once it attains reserve status for a nominal rent of $1. If the band no longer owns the entity operating the PA gas station and convenience store, it would revert to fair market rent. Under ballot 2, there's one parcel in the Arm of Caledonia that has not obtained reserve status, which is why it requires its own ballot. While there are no economic opportunities considered for ballot number 2, this would designate the pre-reserved land for the purpose of leasing for either commercial, light industrial, retail, recreational, educational, institutional, agricultural, and residential uses once it attains reserve status. Under ballot 3, in your designation documents, you would have received a list of lands that are in reserve status along with maps. While there are also no economic opportunities currently being considered, a yes vote to ballot 3 would designate the reserve lands for the same as ballot 2 plus the option of grazing. Finally, the last ballot. In 2007, the Angus Street property was successfully designated for the Cree Line Mini Mart gas station. The previous designation required fair market rent for any leases that were granted on Albert Street. Pursuant to a recent appraisal, the Cree Line Mini Mart's annual rental rate would be $44,000, and the empty lots would be another $66,000. While this money would be deposited into the Piapot Revenue Trust account with ISC, the same would require BCR to withdraw the same, which would restrict access to those funds. Accordingly, Piapot would like to conditionally revoke the 2007 designation and redesignate so that nominal rent of $1 will be paid when the lease is to a wholly owned band entity. And other than the band-operated Cree Line Mini Mart, there are no third-party interests on this land, and there would be no disruption if the designation is revoked. This designation would also further allow on the empty lots commercial, retail, recreational, educational, and institutional options. However, if this designation results in a no vote, the terms of the 2007 designation would still continue, and the band would have to pay fair market rent for any leases entered into on Angus Street, even if it is a wholly owned entity. The next question is, will the band be informed about further projects and will they have a second say in things? Yes, you will. There's a new requirement under Indian Affairs, or I guess ISC, that if you don't know exactly what the purpose is at the time of designation, the council will have to come back to you and hold a meeting, and you'll have an opportunity to see what is being contemplated and a chance to vote on it. With the exception of the Prince Albert gas station, since that's already been decided and is already detailed in that designation document. So the length of this designation is going to be for 99 years. However, Piapot and Her Majesty may enter into lease terms for shorter periods, anywhere from 5 to 25 years, whatever is contemplated. And the designation can be revoked or amended at any time, provided there's no third-party interests on the lands at the time. And even while the land is designated, it will retain its reserve status. Unfortunately, the pre-reserve lands in Prince Albert and Caledonia do not attain reserve status by this designation. You still have to follow all the conditions to grant or to gain reserve status. So what will the amount of the lease payments be? If this designation is successful, rent will be charged as follows. There will be nominal rent for a 100% band-owned entity, including corporations, partnerships, joint ventures, which would be about $1. If the band-owned entity becomes less than 100% owned, the lease reverts to fair market rent. Fair market rent shall be determined by a qualified independent appraiser and shall require a periodic rent review. All of the money collected for Her Majesty for any leases, permits, easements shall be credited to the band. So the majority required for a successful designation is a simple majority, and a simple majority occurs if 50% plus one of those eligible voters who cast a ballot are in favor of the proposed designation. For example, if there are 1,200 band members, only 200 band members vote, then at least 101 must vote in favor. So how and when do you vote? So each designation has a separate ballot with the same question that states, are you, after having had the opportunity to consider and review the corresponding designation document, are you in favor of the said designation? You must place an X, check mark, or other mark in either the yes or the no box without identifying yourself. Voting for all designations will be allowed by mail-in ballot for those members of the band who do not live on the reserve. In-person voting will take place on January 19th, 2019 at the Piapot Band Hall, and polls will be open from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you live on reserve and will not be able to attend on January 19th, please contact Ira LaValle for a ballot package. So what happens if there is a no vote? Then they would require further designation for Piapot to enter into a lease. And if the vote is no on ballot 4, then the existing terms of the 2007 designation would continue. If you have any further questions on this, you can contact Nally Dewick, Ira LaValle, and member of Chief and Council, or myself. Does anyone have any questions for me? Oh, sure. Oh, I'm sorry. So the nominal rent is if there's any wholly owned band companies, then it's $1 for the lease. But if there's a third party that's not band owned, they pay fair market rent. That's right. So it'll still be written reserve status. The designation just ends in 99 years, so you'd have to designate again at year 100. If you wanted to, yeah. We don't have PAs yet, but for Regina, it was the $44,000 for the Cree Line Mini Mart and $66,000 for the empty lots. That's what the rent was appraised at.
So just for clarity, if a business that's sitting on the designated land is 100% owned by the band, then we could do nominal rent. But if even 1% is not owned by the band, then it's fair market rent. So if there's somebody else that's a partner in a business or project, then it's fair market rent. But if it's a business that we're able to do 100% on our own, then we could charge ourselves nominal rent. Because even though Cree land is 100% owned by the band, we've actually never made any rent payment to Indian Affairs for it. Never. Since 2008. It was designated that way. Could have been we just had never done it before, and we just decided to do it as fair market rent without really putting much thought to it. But it should have maybe been done by nominal rent back then, because it was always, the whole goal was always 100% owned by the band. So I think it roughly goes to like $6,500 a month is the rent that Cree land is supposed to make a check out to the Receiver General of Canada and then send it off, and then that sits over there until we draw it down through BCR and all that. Whereas if it's just nominal rent, we'd make a check out for $1, send it to them, and because it'd be used by the band anyway. So that's what that is. So right now, Cree land is set up for market rate rent, so if people wanted to keep it the same, then it just stays the same. It just carries on as is. But if that changes there, then if it's 100% owned by the band, then we're allowed to just charge $1 rent. Gives us that flexibility. And for land that we're designating, we don't actually know what may come down the road, then it requires us to come back, have a meeting here like this, and ask our band members, this is the project. Are you guys okay with us doing that? Yes or no? If it's a no, then it ends there. But we don't have to go through the whole process of having another designation vote. And the reason why, so we would have had to do the designation for the PA land anyway. It was actually the only one that we kind of started with. And then, is that okay? Is it going to squeak pretty quick? Okay, so anyway, we had to do, and it's half an acre, less than half an acre in PA, and it's straightforward, it's for a gas station. There's no other use for that. But we had been approached in the last couple of years for land on the home reserve for potential solar projects. So there were 6 quarters on the home reserve that we identified, and we talked to the people that utilized the land, and we said, well, it'll just carry on as usual, but if something were to come up, then we have to come back and have that discussion. And we tried to pick it close to the 3-phase power line that goes through the reserve, because there isn't really a project small enough that you'd need a 3-phase power line. So we tried to stay close to that for costs down the road as well. So that's kind of mapped out. I believe there's maps that kind of show that. But if you need to, we can show you on maps at the back of the room. Carol has maps. South of Regina, in the last year or so, we've had a few companies that came and they wanted to lock up our land. They said, can we do an agreement with you guys where we would have first right of refusal on any wind projects, like wind turbines, that could potentially happen down there? And we said, yeah, we'd be kind of open to discussion, but what exactly do you mean? And so they wanted to tie up our land without any real plan for a project, just to have that tied up. So we're like, no, we're not going to do that. If anything, we'd be open to a project. And then the next question was, is your land designated for commercial development? Because if we're going to do any kind of business on reserve land, it has to be designated for commercial development, just so it allows business to happen. And we didn't have that. So even right now, south of Regina, we have AMEC that has a weather monitoring tower that's there right now that they put up, I think, in August. So they've already let us know that, well, would Piapot be interested in partnering with us and throwing together a proposal for the community to pursue wind turbine projects if wind is feasible? And we said, yeah, we'd be open to entertaining the discussion. And then their next question was, but is your land designated down there? So before we got to that point, we already kind of started moving in the direction of, well, we should maybe designate certain pieces just so that we're we're ready if something should happen. But even at that point, if something does, we still have to come back and do this. Say, this is what we want to do. Do you guys agree with that, yes or no? And if you guys say no, then it just ends there. Okay, well, nothing changes. So it's kind of, in a sense, the same as the shell of what the hockey rink. So in 2008, that was designated as well for commercial development. Nothing changed, but that was done too under the idea that, well, if something come along, manufacturing or something, maybe there's an opportunity there. So it's there just in case, but it doesn't mean that it was just used for whatever. So it's kind of the same idea that we're doing here. Because if you were to do a wind turbine project, if you have a quarter section that's 160 acres, once the turbine is actually standing and operating, it uses like 1.5 acres out of 160, maybe 2 acres at the most. So it's very, the land usage, the footprint is kind of nominal when you look at a whole quarter section. And the size of project that AMEC is proposing, based on what Sask Power is going to put out a request for proposals on, I think it's 35 towers. So if you take 35 towers times a couple acres, altogether it'd be 70 acres of land, which would be used, but they'd be all spread out. But because we don't exactly know where each tower will go, we kind of just have to set it all up, and then down the road we'll kind of narrow it down and identify what we would actually use. But again, even when we get to that point, we'd have to come back to you guys and say, this is what we want to do. And then probably have a more detailed plan about this is where they kind of line it up to go and break it down by a more specific quarter basis. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. So there's 4 of them, and they're all separated. So it's not like one ballot, you say yes to them all and it's all done. PA designation is by itself. Home reserve designation is by itself. Southland designation is by itself. And then the Cree land nominal rent thing is by itself. So it's all broken up. So you don't have to agree to everything if you wanted to say no on something or no on 3 and yes on 1. But this comes back to a part of our role as chief and council of just trying to figure out ways of how to have the community access more opportunities down the road. We don't exactly know what they would be, but we'd be trying to prepare ourselves for that. And it's one of those things where it's long term, right? Like if you look at the 2008 designation leadership at that time, it's different people kind of around the table right now. So, you know, at the time that an opportunity may arise, it'd be different people that might be around the table. But at least we'd have done this part of it. So that's the idea. So now, are there any other questions before we let Natalie go into the actual process of the designation vote? She can explain it. If there are none, then I'll just hand it over to her and she can start going into that.
Reach. Move. Okay. Here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Natalie Dueck. I'm from Indigenous Services. I'm the electoral officer for this designation. I'm also from Gordon's originally. So if you have any questions, my name and phone number are within the package. So you're more than welcome to give me a call anytime if you have any questions in regards to the vote process. So like I said, my role is working with the Indian Act and the Indian referendum regulations within it for the voting process. So I'll be the one at the polling station on January 19th for the day. It's open from 9 o'clock to 8 p.m. And we'll actually be counting the ballots right then and there after 8 o'clock. So membership's more than welcome to come down and watch the actual tally of the votes. So I know for on reserve, what has happened is everyone's should be getting a package, an information package. And if you don't have one, you can get one from, I believe, the band office or IRA. There's a lot of them, and a lot of them should have been delivered already. So within your package, there would be a notice of referendum. This is just information on the different ballots that are included in this vote. And so there's 4 of them. And then it tells you where the information meeting is and where the actual vote is on here. There's also a letter in here from the chief out to all the members. And then the information document. The information document is more of a summary of all 4 ballots. So it gives you a really good summary on what you're voting on. This is probably one of the most important pieces in here. After that is the actual designation documents. There's 4 of them. Obviously, if you're voting on 4 different designations, they're all in there. So these actually will have, at the end of them, the legal land descriptions of where the lands are located. And there's also maps in there, so you can see where the land is located. So you have a better idea. And if anyone is unable to attend January 19th here to vote, I know there's packages with ballots in them that will be available for everyone. If everyone would like to vote today, you're more than welcome. So here's the 4 different ballots here. And you'll just see on here that there's where you vote yes or no on there. You just make an X in the box, fold it back up, and there's actual, this is the declaration envelope, so you'll have to fill it out and seal it and have a witness sign it so I can take it. I won't be able to just take the ballots themselves. So this will stay sealed until the day of the vote, so I'll bring these all back with me. This is basically what the off-reserve membership would have gotten in the mail, and for them, we supply another envelope that they can actually put back in the mail and send to us that's prepaid. So if anyone, like I said, like to vote today, you're more than welcome. We can do that. I know there's ballot packages that have been brought here for everyone. And I guess the only other thing really is in regards to the review process. Just so you know that an elector can request a review of the referendum if they feel that there's any controversy with the vote itself. So just so you know that, if there's any corrupt practices or anything like that that they feel that needs to be investigated, they can request a review of the referendum, and they have to forward the request to the minister by registered mail addressed to the Assistant Deputy Minister within 7 days after the vote. So they have to do a declaration and then containing the grounds of the request and relevant information, and further information to the appeal process will be referred to. You can refer to the Indian referendum regulations for that. And